So, I just wanted to make this very quickly to say I might have been initially wrong in some aspects of my observance of some of the really long ago archived things of Bill Milton Cooper and his what used to be his radio show called The Hour of the Time, which I guess was kind of a pun on the book of Revelations in regards to the second coming of Christ or whatnot. It was kind of, I think it was kind of taken out of that. Um, the title of his book, Behold a Pale Horse, actually was from the book of Daniel. No, the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 3, I think. Or Revelation chapter 4, Behold a Pale Horse, talking about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. But I do think that I might have over exaggerated some aspects of my analysis of Bill Cooper from about 5 months previous to this. The guy does try to go out of his way to try to encourage people that hear his old broadcasts to do their own research and to try to find the truth for themselves, which is actually the best advice you could ever give anybody when it comes to anything, period. Whether it's culinary, medicinal, scientific, mathematical, anything really related to poetry, related to prose, recommendation of literature, just anything really. The best advice you could give anyone is, you need to do your own research and and of course, give people suggestions on what to read and stuff. You don't have to be vague, but if you are a truth seeker, a real truth seeker, you will actually try to be more self-aware of what's going on around you. You will legitimately try to find and seek out the truth over what you want things to be, regardless of how antagonistic it might be to your own personal prejudice, your personal peats. You have to overcome yourself to really find the full truth and the full extent of it. And you have to get rid of your ego. You don't need to get rid of your own ego. It's not about changing who you are. That's not at all the case, but just coming to accept the aspect of certain things. You're not going to live forever, okay? You're not going to be alive forever. You will die. A time will come when your life will be over with. And you could at least settle with trying to find out and accept as much as you can within the scope of your life. Dying with an honest intention, dying with an honest, consistent, and concise view of everything, at least to me, is better than to be dishonest and to not be concise and to not legitimately want to try to find out as much as you can your own possible lifetime. I think that that is very selfish. It's very selfish motivated, and it's a bad place to be. So, anyways, I do think that Bill Cooper was kind of a bit of a rabble rouser. I don't think he really understood about organizing societies and actually trying to try to orchestrate like alternatives for intelligence networks. But that he didn't claim to do that either. Of course, Bill Cooper never tried to claim that he did have a solution. He was just telling people, he was giving the people a diagnosis of what the problem he thought was. And he was telling people that if they didn't feel that this was enough, then they could go do their own research. So, indeed, he was a bit more didactic and much more of a freelance journalist. He was kind of a bit of a freelance journalist, and he just would go over any topic really, in regards to talking about what he considered to be the New World Order. And it's interesting that while this was very popular around Y2K, that was the height of his popularity, was like around Y2K. Nobody really talks about the New World Order anymore. And it hasn't really been a thing for a long time. But it was very popular to talk about the Illuminati and the New World Order and stuff around Y2K. There was even an Illuminati card deck. It was actually very popular in the 1990s. And it actually had Trump has one of the cards in the Illuminati card game. Something that's really interesting to look back on. But anyways, the times have changed, and probably as time does continue to go on, it's going to be quite harder for people to really listen to Bill Cooper's old radio stuff. But I do think that in the last 6 months of his life, I do think that he was co-opted by deep state, by the deep state. I think they compromised him, and they kind of had control of him. Now, in June of 2001, he did come out about Osama bin Laden and about the attack on the World Trade Center. I mean, he did predict in June that there was going to be an attack on the United States and that the deep state would claim that it was Osama bin Laden that did it, and Al Qaeda. And then in September of the same year, that did actually happen. And he did predict that. But I do think that probably in about the last year of his life, he was co-opted by the deep state. I think he was compromised. Of course, you know, he still talked out, but I do think for a couple of years he was probably compromised by the establishment. They tried to intimidate his life, and they intimidated him and intimidated his family and stuff. They intimidated people close to him, and he kind of I think he did give in for a while, and then he broke out against it. He backlashed after that, and then they killed him. Then they fucking killed him. So I guess I was wrong about Cooper. He was not the worst. Obviously, he did do a lot at the time, but I do think that he was compromised by the deep state for a time. And he was killed by the establishment. But, it's interesting that Alex Jones is now selling out his assets, including InfoWars, because of the lawsuit from the Sandy Hook victims. He got sued in a civil case, and he's having to sell his assets. I find it interesting that Alex Jones actually stole a lot of Bill Cooper's material and used that in his InfoWars, and now it's like the shoe is on the other foot now, and it looks like Bill Cooper has been vindicated in that sense about InfoWars and Alex Jones, and just, but back then, Alex Jones was quite different. Like, he was thin, and he wasn't yelling and screaming on air and making outlandish claims and stuff. I mean, he sort of did, but at the same time, he was a little bit more down to earth back in the day, and his talk with Bill Cooper was actually quite significantly interesting. I was actually surprised when I listened to it. He was actually quite calm. He just basically questioned Bill Cooper, and they chatted. They mainly talked about Waco, and that was it. They actually Alex Jones didn't really go too deep into anything. I think Alex Jones was really only beginning to sort of dig at the surface about this stuff, and Bill Cooper was much more advanced in the knowledge and stuff. Bill Cooper was much older than Alex Jones. He had been in the Navy. He had been involved in naval intelligence and stuff, and he came out and talked about this, which is probably one of the reasons why he was later compromised and intimidated by the authorities. So now it took a while before the Fed actually did catch on to him, because for like 11, 12 years from 1989, that's when he published his book. He largely was allowed to get away with what he said. And I think he blew up, especially after the Oklahoma bombings and Waco. He really started to blow up a lot. And that's also, I think, when he started to change his position. He changed his position from where he believed that UFO was alien tech to where he talked about Majestic 12 and Area 51 and UFOs as man-made. So he did change. It is true that he did change his positions, and he wasn't always consistent and honest with that in that regard. But I think where he made his mistake is when he tried to support the militia. I think if Bill Cooper had never talked about supporting the militia movement and any of that stuff and getting involved with that, I think that probably would have saved him, and there's no telling where things could have gone from there. But he did support the militia movement, and he did that right at the time that Waco and the Oklahoma City stuff was happening, and major backlash against that and increasing gun laws and stuff. And eventually, it got up to him. The federal government saw him as a threat, and he kept making he kept saying flamboyant stuff about people and stuff and being rather outlandish. And, he was deemed a danger, and they compromised him. First, they tried to intimidate his family. and people in his community and stuff. And I think he did fall through with that for a while. And then after that, he went back to doing it again, and so they took him out. Um, Now it is possible that they probably kidnapped him and took him and put him in a FEMA camp, and the guy that supposedly was him that the police killed was a reassigned agent. They do that sometimes, but it's impossible to prove whether or not that was the case. But Bill Cooper did say a lot of stuff. I think that sometimes he had trouble being completely concise about it. And he did sort of start to kind of follow Alex Jones and start to get into more of this kind of a yelling at the microphone and sort of just having a temperament issue and drinking problems. Family members and people in his community did say that he had some drinking problems during the last years of his life. But yeah, I mean, he did tell a lot of the truth. And honestly, I would tell people to watch his old podcasts long before, I tell people to watch Alex Jones. Alex Jones just stole a lot of his material from a lot of people. Um, so yeah, I mean, Bill Cooper was right about how the deep state will create these Ted Kaczynski types that, will be their controlled opposition and stuff, and they'll use this to, like, say that incels are bad, uh, right wing white men are bad, or just any sort of right wing people are evil and stuff. But yeah, honestly, I think that if Bill Cooper had not been pro militia, I think if he had not been so big on supporting the militia stuff, I think he probably could have gotten away with a lot more than what he actually did, at least for a while. I really wonder what Bill Cooper would have thought about Donald Trump and all of that stuff. It would have been interesting. I think Bill Cooper was a Democrat, though. He was not Republican. Um, I don't know what he would have said about Donald Trump talking about the deep state and the establishment narratives and stuff. Donald Trump is the only former president to even talk about any of that kind of stuff. No other former president has ever done that, at least not since JFK, anyway. So, Toxic Angel says, you mean William Cooper, the one the cops killed? Yes, that Bill Milton Cooper, William Milton Cooper. Most of his friends just called him Bill. Yep, he sure did. Toxic Angel said then he got killed. Yeah, the establishment did not want someone like that alive. Bill Cooper was Frederick says Bill Cooper was a cringe rice burner. Well, maybe so, but he said a lot of good stuff. Like, nobody else who was involved in the naval intel was coming out and talking about the kind of stuff that he was. And like, he did have the protocols in his Behold a Pale Horse. Amazon took it out, though, so if you buy it, Amazon will not have that chapter in there. They took it out. Frederick says he was compromised by having mixed children. Couldn't allow himself to see the truth. Cognitive dissonance. Well, he was a very well-informed dude. I wouldn't let something like that distract you away from what he said. You don't have to agree with the man's politics or his morality to at least, come to the conclusion that he was the first major radio talk show host to actually really deep dive into a lot of these subjects. Like, what was that show? That talk show? I forgot. There was this late night talk show. There was this radio talk show that like came on real late at night. Forgot what it was called, but this guy would have a bunch of people come on and talk about all sorts of different conspiracies and stuff. I'll search it up, and he always lied and would just say the most random schizophrenic stuff. You know, at least Bill Cooper actually cared enough to just be straight with people and tell them. Okay, it was called the Arbel Show. That's it, Arbel. Yeah, it was called Arbel or Coast to Coast. And it was actually it was a very popular show back then. It was probably one of the most popular internet, well, news television shows. It was headed by Arbel, and you know, he invited people to come on and he'd talk about whatever kind of things. And it was just basically just the most random schizophrenic stuff. Bill Cooper was always quite honest and concise by comparison. And, you know, Alex Jones just stole a lot of his material. But yeah, Bill Cooper also didn't try to, like, you know, get people to buy a bunch of his products. He just had one book. Maybe he had two books. And he just encouraged people to buy his book. And that was it. And his book was actually quite cheap. So, I mean, Alex Jones is always getting people to buy his ridiculous, useless products. And he makes a lot of money off of his own merchandise at InfoWars. Bill Cooper never made anything out of what he did. He just talked about it and stuff. And it was basically that. He knew the objective morality of everything, but couldn't concede that what he believed before was wrong. He always defended the boomer truth regime at every level. That is actually true, and I'm not going to lie. I mean, you are right about that, about the stuff. I don't know. I never really listened to Bill Cooper's take on World War II. I don't think he really talked much about World War II. In a sense, he believed the deep state was secretly racist, and that was his whole critique. The deep state did not like Martin Luther King Jr. It is true that the FBI did keep a list on Martin Luther King Jr., and they considered him to be a dangerous rogue. But then later, they did successfully compromise Martin Luther King's narrative into line with the establishment. So when Martin Luther King Jr. was alive, they considered him to be a communist or a communist asset of the KGB, and they considered him to be anti-establishment. But once Martin Luther King Jr. was dead, and once people's opinions and thoughts about Jim Crow and all of that changed to one of desegregation and integration, the establishment changed things around to where now Martin Luther King Jr. was pro-establishment. So they changed it after he died. But when he was alive and actually doing stuff at Tulsa, Alabama, or wherever, they generally saw him as a communist sympathizer, secretly a communist supporter. I agree with your point on his support of the militia movement, though. Oh, those guys are full of feds. Well, actually, the militia movement doesn't really exist anymore. there's a few groups or a few rogue groups all around the country, but they're very small and they're scattered, and it's just it's mainly a bunch of baby boomers that are into the militia thing. It's not like what it used to be in the 1990s and 80s, and it's pretty much dead now. It's kind of gone. It fell out of popularity. It was actually in the USA. It was replaced with the Tea Party. It was replaced by the Tea Party, and then that was replaced with the alt-right or the Trump thing. All of these movements were basically compromised and just basically put into the Trump support movement. And I have no idea what they're doing now in terms of these groups and stuff. But yeah, the militia movement's has been over for decades now. But it was really popular and big when he was alive, Bill Cooper. And, it would just be interesting what he would have thought about in regards to what's going on now. I imagine him, just basically laughing in his grave, laughing his ass off about Alex Jones losing his assets, his wife divorcing him, coming out in support of the establishment by supporting Donald Trump as president, and basically compromising himself to the wills of the establishment. But yeah, I think what probably did Bill Cooper in was when he supported the militia movement. Toxic Angel says Coast to Coast AM. Coast to Coast AM. Frederick says, yeah. Yeah, I would have to look more into what Bill Cooper thought about World War II. He was anti-Zionist. I do think that Bill Cooper was anti-Zionist. He tended to go into all sorts of different things. I think he did do a lot in the end when it came to basically talking about stuff that was really unpopular. Well, not unpopular, but unknown. I should say unknown. Okay, I don't really see anything about William Cooper talking about World War II. All that I know is that some footnotes from the protocols were in Bill Cooper's book, Behold a Pale Horse. And he did talk about some things about Jewish Masonic societies. So he actually did do that. So I don't think he was a truth boomer. He just probably didn't really read and study deeply into World War II a lot. But anyways, yeah, Bill Cooper did wake a lot of people up, and he did also create a lot of hysterical stuff as well. But he also brought a lot of knowledge to the foreground about secret societies. And to date, I don't really know of anybody else who has actually done that. So I don't think that I was entirely wrong about Bill Cooper, but yeah, I mean, he was a truth seeker for a while. I do think that at the start of his career, he was basically still tied down into the alien UFO stuff. And he was basically following the establishment's agenda of the UFO conspiracy when he did that. But when he started talking about Majestic 12 and Area 51, I think that's when he became a legitimate truth seeker. But most of his stuff tended to be about UFOlogy. I don't think he really studied military history and logistics Frederick, I think he was just more of a UFOologist who got into the militia movement, and that's probably really what did him in when he started to talk about Waco and got noticed by the FBI and all of that. That's what led to his downfall, was the support of the militia. Pretty much it compromised everything else that he did, because now they could write him up as being a domestic terrorist and a domestic threat. So that being said, I guess that's really it. Was Bill Cooper right about everything? No. Did he make some pretty good points and good arguments about secret societies? Yes. So everyone has their goods and bads and everything. Like Bill Cooper was very good when it came to discussing secret societies and pointing out intelligence agencies and the secret societies and what each of these groups did and who they were and where they came from and the entire history behind that. I think that was his greatest strength. Again, was he able to really provide much of an alternative? No. He obviously did not. He wanted to follow the Constitution, even though the Constitution basically is the founding document that legitimized the formation of secret societies to begin with. The King of Britain banned secret societies, or some of them, and when the American colonists rebelled and declared their independence, they were actually, in a way, able to legitimize the existence and the longevity of the secret societies that the King of England had, to some degree, banned. Now, of course, there's always two sides to everything, but in a sense, he was right about a lot of stuff, and then maybe he was kind of short-sighted about other things, but to date, he is the one that has really talked perhaps the deepest and the most openly about the most deepest secrets of a lot of these secret societies. And I think that's what really makes Bill Cooper and his legacy, as well as the people around him that helped to get his stuff out. I think that's what makes his legacy the most profound. Was he eventually compromised and then taken out? Yes. But at least for a time, he did talk about the truth. Maybe he relented on some of the aspects of it, but it seems to me that at least later in his life, at least in the later years after he started to talk about Majestic 12 and Area 51 and man-made spacecraft, he became much more honest. Whereas before he was talking about alien UFOs and stuff and kind of really fitting more of a pro-establishment take on that.